Okay, so this is the introduction to Chapter 7, which is Fraud, Internal Control, and Cash. You can see the chapter is broken up into 4 parts, and this is how I tend to organize the chapter. So as you're studying it, you may find it helpful to work within those groupings, because that's how I organize the podcasts and generally the notes on it. Okay, so why is learning about this going to be helpful to you personally? That's a question that I always try to answer with accounting, because for a lot of you, I know this is a required course, and you're probably asking yourself that question quite often. So basically the first reason to learn about internal control is for your own financial self-defense. U.S. companies lose about $1 trillion every year to employee fraud. Employees steal stuff, they steal inventory, they steal equipment, they steal cash. And presumably you're taking business courses because you're either going to want to run your own business or you're going to be working in business. Either way, you need to know about internal control principles and how they apply to your business. As a business owner, you do not want to be one of the ones who contributes to that $1 trillion in losses to employee theft every year. If you're working for somebody else's company, you're probably going to be a manager. You may be responsible for some of that company's assets, and you don't want a lot of fraud to occur on your watch and under your realm of responsibility. So that's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is the recent Sarbanes-Oxley legislation that actually came into being after the last financial crisis to try and reassure markets. And Sarbanes-Oxley, SOX for short, whether you go into accounting or the management of a publicly traded company, you need to know about how to set up an internal control system, how it works, because management is responsible for filing a report with the Securities and Exchange Commission. This is for publicly traded companies, and accountants auditing those firms are required to file a separate report on the internal control of a company and how well it's working. So those are a couple of reasons why it's a good idea for you to learn about the principles of internal control. Now, how to really learn these so that they mean something to you, I always advise my students to take things personally. So you can memorize the principles of internal control, but they're really not going to mean that much to you, and you'll forget them right after the exam. But if you think about, how do they apply to me personally? In other words, how do I manage my own assets? How do I, and then you think about a company that you might have worked for, or you might want to work for, that you're somehow familiar with. How do they manage their internal control? Is it good? Is it satisfactory? Is it not working? And so apply these principles to something that you know. That's really the best way to learn anything you're doing. The other thing is, and this is not on the test and you're not responsible for it, but if you are running your own business now, or you really want to know the nuts and bolts of how to set up a system of internal control and how it works, I provide extras. They're optional, but one of the extras in this chapter is the Securities and Exchange Commission Guide for Small Business on how to set up internal control. You'll find that in the internal control section. That's the learning objectives 1 through 4. The last item, it'll be extras. And in there, in those extras section, there's usually a few links to what I call the real world of accounting, and those may be helpful to you. So this wraps up the introduction to Chapter 7. The next podcast will get into learning objectives 1 through 4. Check this out.
Huh?
I brought it down. I put
Okay.
the cap on. All right, ready to upload whenever you are. Oh wait, am I still recording? I thought I stopped it. Oh no, it's not. Okay.
29 for something this big is pretty good. 29 highway. This is a lot bigger than the prospect. And you're losing 3 miles per gallon for something that, yeah, it's really good. So I mean, the prospect goes 32, but no, because it's just a small engine. So that's the thing that looks all burly, and then it's 140 horsepower, and everybody hates it. They don't hate it, but it's like that's the major complaint with that car. Is everybody hates so much power. You know, where Forester is always, you know, Jeff misses his, and all he has is a 2.5. But he's like, yeah, it had balls comparatively. It wasn't like I ever. It's not like you get behind the wheel like a Forester shared Miriam. It wasn't like you're like woohoo, when you're like good. You know, it's like you're never like. It's like it's what I call that. Yeah, it's not like I mean, there's a GTI parked down the street or anything like that. You'd be like Yahoo, you know, and then I'd drive down a gravel road and rip the bottom of it out. So this stuff, like I'm hoping to get this in the premium, so that I can have the tinted windows and the rails, because those are things I'll have to spend money. I probably wouldn't get the windows tinted, but just living where we do, leaving stuff in the back, it's a safety concern. This is the one with 11,000 in the car. So this is the base model. No tinted windows, no roof rails.
Of the ones you've been looking at, if you look at it's still available, but the best transportation now is only 0 for the trade. It's already going to market against the thousand, so you're not going to negotiate a lot.
Yeah, but that's